Got a question for you. Have you ever missed an appointment? Hands up if you've missed an appointment. Another question. Have you ever missed a really important appointment? Several of us. I want to tell you a story. The first time I led a pilgrimage to Rome was about 20 years ago. I was a young priest then. And there were about 20 of us. Now, I would never do this today, but at that time I was the tour organizer, I was the tour guide, I was the spiritual director, I was the whole thing. But it was a wonderful experience. We went to different places. It went to Rome and to Assisi. And on the final day, we were back in Rome, and I made a very special appointment. It was for our group to have Mass at St. Peter's Basilica at 7:30 in the morning. You might think, well, that sounds exciting. But it is, because, well, if you've ever gone to St. Peter's Basilica, it's very busy. But not at 7:30 in the morning. And when you go early, you go with a group, you book a little chapel. And we had booked a chapel down in the lower level of St. Peter's, which is at the level of the church that was built by the Emperor Constantine in the 4th century. I mean, how cool is that? It was really, really cool. So I was very excited. So it was the night before, and I gathered the group together. And you see, we had a little bit of a straggler problem. You know what I mean? You know when adults go on like a bus tour or a tour where they're told what to do? Like all the adults become like kids, right? And it's kind of like herding cats. So we had a number of stragglers who wouldn't kind of show up on time. So I laid down the law. I read the riot act. I said, we are leaving this hotel tomorrow morning at 6:30, with or without you. And if you're not here, we're leaving because we can't be late. And you have to find your own way to St. Peter's, and you may or may not be able to get in, okay? So off we went. I went to bed that night. I was pretty tired. And I woke up the next morning with a phone call to my room. And I answered it. And I heard a voice saying, Father James, where are you? We're all down here in the lobby waiting for you. I looked at the clock and it was 6:40 a.m. Talk about missing an appointment. As we begin our journey through Lent, we're beginning a Lenten preaching series entitled Lent in a Time of Less. A lot has changed in our world over the last few years, has it not? Hello? A lot has changed in our country. We hear stories about food insecurity, how it's risen as the cost of groceries and the cost of, well, everything continues to increase. We hear about the housing market and how it's causing great suffering for many as the cost of even small one-bedroom apartments skyrocket. More and more people, even those with jobs, can't find a place to live. Global instability is back. Wars in Eastern Europe and in the Middle East continue to visit horrors on millions of innocent people, while the fear of escalation looms over us. The relative stability of the last 30 years is rapidly disappearing in the rearview mirror. Nations all over the world, including Canada, experience political strife that is becoming alarmingly and increasingly polarized. This Lent is a Lent in a time of less. Less means less security, less stability, and for many, less peace. It's a real experience of wilderness. In the gospel today, we hear about a wilderness. We hear that Jesus went into the wilderness for 40 days and that he was tempted. Now, we too can be tempted as we experience this Lent in a time of less, this Lent of 40 days. We too can be tempted as we experience this present season as an experience of wilderness. Now, if you've ever been to the Holy Land, you may have passed through the Judean wilderness where Jesus went. This is what it looks like. Pretty much everywhere you go, that's what it looks like. And the word in the New Testament used for wilderness can also be translated as desert. I mean, you may have heard that Jesus spent 40 days in the desert, or it's sometimes translated as deserted place. And all of these translations are good. They're good translations. Now, just as Jesus was tempted in the wilderness, so we can also be tempted in our wilderness experiences, in the experiences of wilderness in each of our lives. The wilderness is a deserted place. And in deserted places, we can feel deserted. We can feel abandoned. And this can lead to being tempted by overwhelming feelings of loneliness. Loneliness today is reaching epidemic proportions. A 2018 survey conducted by The Economist said that more than 2 out of 10 adults in the US and in the UK, and quite probably in Canada as well, quote, always or often feel lonely, lack companionship, or feel left out or isolated, end quote. Another study revealed that 54% of respondents in the United States said that they, quote, always or sometimes feel that no one knows them well. In Canada, a full 28% of households are people living alone. And in the European Union, it's 32%. Loneliness comes with associated health risks. A 2015 study found that lonely people had a 26% higher risk of dying, with that figure rising to 32% for those who live alone. Loneliness can be experienced in the wilderness. The wilderness can be a place where we can be tempted by feelings of loss. In the wilderness, we experience loss. There are no conveniences, no amenities. It's hot, it's harsh, it's bleak. Heck, you don't even get a cell phone signal. It's a place that strips away the things that we so often depend on. It is a place of loss. Loss, grief, and despair are true wilderness experiences. And they eventually afflict anyone who has anything to lose, and that's all of us. The wilderness is a place where we can be tempted by fear. The gospel tells us that Jesus was with the wild beasts. Well, wild beasts are kind of scary, aren't they? Especially if you're alone, especially if you're vulnerable. Our present time of less can be a time of fear. The promise of financial security, if we ever had it, is now elusive to many. Many young people have a fear of the future. They are, when I first wrote this, I started writing we, and I had to cross that out. They are being told that they'll be the first generation in modern times that will be worse off than their parents. Endless news cycles that serve as every bad news story from around the world keep our cortisol levels high by reminding us of all the wild beasts out there, real or imagined. So, what's a person to do? What are we to do with these experiences of loneliness and loss and fear? Well, here's the truth. Just as Jesus was met by his Father in the wilderness, God wants to meet us in the wilderness. God wants to meet each and every single one of us in the wilderness of our lives. And that's not just because God can meet us anywhere, which is true, but because there's something unique about the wilderness. When all our false gods are taken from us, all our crutches are removed, the wilderness reveals to us our fundamental need for God. Now, 700 years before Jesus walked the earth, the prophet Hosea, one of the prophets of the Hebrew people, he wrote a prophecy. He sensed that God was speaking to the people of Israel. And God spoke to the people of Israel as if Israel was a person, was a woman. And this is what God said through the prophet: I will now allure her and bring her into the wilderness and speak tenderly to her. The Lord wants to speak tenderly to each of us in this Lent, in a time of less. He wants to meet us in this wilderness where we're tempted by loneliness, loss, and fear. You see, there is an appointment, an important appointment, a divine appointment that we don't want to miss. The Lord wants to speak tenderly to us and turn our loneliness into aloneness. They're not the same thing, loneliness and aloneness. The words sound similar, but they describe emotional and spiritual states that are worlds apart. Loneliness is true desolation, a painful and searing isolation in which we are imprisoned. Aloneness is the awareness that we're uniquely known and loved by God. It's a place of intimacy with the one who allures us, a place where searing isolation is turned to soaring inspiration. Rather than being a prison, it's a place of freedom. The Lord wants to speak tenderly to us and turn our experiences of loss, and we all have them, into gain. Hi. The Lord wants to turn our experiences of loss, she's got a great smile, loss into gain. St. Paul talks about this in his letter to the Philippians, in which he says that he's willing to suffer the loss of everything and regard all these things that he's thought so important to be rubbish in order that he may gain Christ. You see, the Lord can turn our loss into gain. In the wilderness, the Lord wants to speak tenderly to us and turn our fear into courage. Jesus said, in this world you will have trouble, but take courage, for I have overcome the world. Many of the problems that tempt us to be afraid, they're real, folks. We know that. They're very real. But courage is about pressing on. Courage is about doing what we have to do, even if we are afraid. And the Lord will give us, when He speaks tenderly to us, He will give us a supernatural gift of courage. All of this. And it will happen in the wilderness, provided that we don't miss the appointment. And Lent is the time of divine appointment. Now, over the last few weeks, we've been speaking about the many ways in which we can encounter the Lord in a new way or a deeper way during the season of Lent. And this weekend, I want to focus especially on the upcoming parish Lenten mission that starts next week. Bishop Scott McCaig is going to be our retreat director. And the main sessions of the mission will happen on Sunday night, Monday night, and Tuesday night from 7 to 8:30 p.m. right here. He's going to be presiding at all the masses next week. He's going to be preaching. We have a special bonus session on Saturday morning with Bishop Scott right here, but just for the ladies. And on Monday and Tuesday, there will be morning. We're going to have morning mass here, Bishop Scott will preach, and we'll have an informal session up in the parish center for those who can join us. The theme of the parish mission is Oasis in the Desert. Think of an oasis in the wilderness, in the desert. It's a place of refreshment, a place of rest, a place of peace that provides shade from the hot sun. It's a place of encounter with the God who desires to speak tenderly to each of us. And He's going to be there, waiting for us. So trust me, this is an appointment you don't want to miss. Oh, about that appointment in Rome? Well, I missed the 6:30 appointment with my group. But as for the 7:30 appointment for Mass at St. Peter's, we made it by the skin of our teeth. Now, I was thoroughly embarrassed, unshaven and unshowered, my hair sticking up. I've got the photographs to prove it. But no one seemed to mind. And we had a wonderful, beautiful experience that I still remember to this day.